A lot of the things that are happening today are things that will affect your careers. So it's very important to first understand those things. And then the second one is to change them.
Indermit, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. To start off, I know that your schedule is so busy. Why do you think it's important to take time to speak to young people?
For me, it's important because it actually makes me much more motivated. But the other thing is, a lot of the things that are happening today are things that will affect your careers. So it's very important to first understand those things, I think. And then the second one is to change them, right? But before you can even think about changing things, you need to understand them. And it's a very difficult world out there. And I think that given the fact that I've worked in this profession for about 40 years now, it actually also gives me a chance to help to distill some of those things and to see whether we can understand them together.
Could you maybe share a little bit more about the different ways that young people should think about finding skills, being entrepreneurial, looking into other kinds of work, other kinds of mentorship?
You have to have a specialization, right? I mean, we talk about that in the World Bank like a T profile, and we sort of say, okay, you have to understand the landscape broadly, but then you have to have a skill which is relatively deep, which few people have,
That's a great reminder.
There you go. The second one is, I know that a lot of people over here are taught that you should network a lot. I don't like that. I actually find that when you're young, you should first work and then network. The work part is very important because if you find a good worker, you may not need to network that much because when I find a good worker, I'm not going to let that person go. Right?
It's important to find mentors and allies, right?
That's the third thing. After being here at the World Bank for a while, when I came, my first thing was, what area of work should I specialize in? What area of the world should I work in? At the end of my first 10, 15 years, I realized wrong questions. It should be, who should I work with? Because there are some people who you work with and you grow, and then there are other people you work with and you don't.
Over your time at the World Bank, what have you learned about what it takes for good ideas and solid evidence to actually translate into influencing decisions on the ground?
I'll give you two short stories on this one. So I was the country economist in Brazil in 1997 or something like that. And on the weekend I was reading the newspaper, and around that time things started to go wrong in Asia. The Asian financial crisis had started. Things had not gotten bad in Latin America yet at all. So I was reading this newspaper, and it just struck me that sooner or later this crisis is going to affect Brazil. So what I did was I got into my car at that time, because all our computers used to only be at the office. So I got into the car, went to my office, and what I did was I just sat down. I think I spent the whole day just writing up what would be the policy reforms that Brazil should undertake in case there was a crisis. Because crises are the times when people want to change things, otherwise they don't change things. So I remember sitting down and I wrote up 3 matrices. What was the problem and what the government should do about it and what would be the payoff. One was in the area of social security, one was in the area of administrative reforms, and one was in the area of labor market reforms. I printed them out and I put them in my drawer, literally like that, I put them in my drawer. And then, went back home, and then suddenly the crisis came. And the country director called a meeting and said, okay, we have a crisis, we need to sort of come up with a package of support. So who has ideas about what we should be doing about this? Well, I had these 3 matrices, and it turns out then like at least 2 out of the 3 major loans were actually based essentially on a refinement of those things.
Wow.
Okay? So I think you have to have good ideas in your pocket. The second thing I remember, Hannah, was when we did the 2009 World Development Report. There were these big questions that people had. So is urbanization a very bad thing because it leads to slums? To those kind of things. And we spent a whole year actually, and great team, by the way. My rule for the team was nobody above 35 Definitely nobody above 40. And I think we changed the debate a bit, because if you sort of think about it now, nobody talks about urbanization as a bad thing. And when we talk about regional development, for example, we actually do have some rules about when should you try to sort of move jobs to people rather than allow people to come to jobs, those kind of things. And there were other debates like that. So I think those would be my two examples.
Those are great, thank you.
Yeah.
I know that you've just announced that you're retiring from the World Bank after an amazing career here and also in some other institutions. And I'm wondering if you could speak to your younger self at the start of your World Bank career, what advice would you give about navigating a life in economic development and policy work? And what message would you share with young people who want to shape the future of development, policy, and work in their own countries?
So I think the first thing I would tell you is that, because having both worked inside the World Bank and outside, I would tell you that the World Bank is a great place to work in. So if you want to work on development, either work in a developing country or work at the World Bank. Ideally, combine the two. Work for the World Bank in a developing country. I think that these jobs that you have in country offices are the best jobs in development. The second thing I would say is, I was looking at my farewell speech the last time I retired. So I retired 10 years ago. Almost exactly to the day.
Wow.
And I actually thought a lot about it at that time, because my kids were going to be there at my farewell. But they're not going to be there at my farewell this time, because
Did they not believe you this time?
There you go. But this time I intend to stick the landing. So I looked at that and I said, okay, what was it that actually struck me? Because at that time it was like a little bit more in the sense of, what would I change? What would I change then? I said three things. So the first one was that I would be more idealistic. And I think what I was thinking at that time was, you have to have a project bigger than yourself. It can't just be, how can Hannah get the next promotion? It has to be, how can I make the world better? The second thing I remember at that time was, I didn't celebrate the work of other people enough. It was always my work rather than good work. You have to celebrate good work, not just your own work. So you have to be more generous in that sense. And then the third thing was, tell the truth. To tell people what you're thinking, rather than, trying to sort of say, is this going to be good for me if this person knows this is what I'm thinking? No, just tell the truth. The other thing is, I think I saw this in a lecture by a former basketball coach, that he had a very special relationship with his father, and he said that he always felt better about himself after he talked to his dad than he did before, And I find that there are people like that at the World Bank too. Whenever you meet them, you feel better afterwards, Spend more time with those guys, because there has to be something magical about them, But I think more importantly, ask yourself the question, is Hannah going to feel better after she talks with me, or is she going to feel worse? Okay? And the answer should be pretty much always, she should feel better.
I certainly feel better after talking to you. And congratulations on your upcoming retirement. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you for asking me.